Okay, move there.
Oh, she's on the ground.
Move there.
Down here?
Move there. Yeah, moving.
Go.
No. Wait, jaga it.
We just found our first orangutan. This is Mina and her baby. Mina was taken from her own mother and kept illegally as a pet before being rescued and released back into the wild here in Bukit Lawang at the entrance to the Leuser National Park in Sumatra. It's great to see her so confident with her baby, but because of that time spent with humans, Mina doesn't always behave the way a wild orangutan would. She is just up in a tree where she should be, not down on the ground. Orangutans are amazing animals. They're so like humans in so many ways. They're adept tool users, incredible problem solvers, and they're full of character and intelligence, which you can see in their behaviour. This is Charlie, a Bornean orangutan who's very special to me. Charlie is a peacemaker, loves food above anything else. Of our two females, Malua is a free spirit and very playful, and Juanita is dark and brooding and fiercely independent. The Auckland Zoo primate team have really close relationships with these orangutans, earned through mutual respect and trust and learning to read their complex behaviour. I adore them all and have a particularly close relationship with Charlie, who I've worked with for nearly half my life. While we care for our orangutans in the zoo, we also need to look after the wild places in Sumatra and Borneo where these species are still found. Historically, Sumatra was actually known as the Island of Gold because of the gold found in the highlands. But these days, forest land is seen as a potential source of wealth for palm oil, pulp and paper, and that's a huge threat for wildlife, particularly orangutans, who are especially adapted for an arboreal lifestyle. They need forests to survive. But what if there are other riches already in the forest? Riches that don't need to be extracted, they just need to be there. The island of Sumatra is twice the size of New Zealand, but 50 million people live there. That's over 10 times our population. As the population grows, Indonesia wants the economy of this resource-rich island to grow as well. Rainforests offer a number of different economic possibilities. The rise of ecotourism is a sustainable way forward, which we can see in Bukit Lawang, a small village that acts as the gateway to the Leuser National Park. But if it's going to be truly sustainable long-term, ecotourism has to work for everyone: animals, locals, tourists and the forest. The best place to start is by having the right people in key positions. Bukit Lawang local John Purba is one of them. John's a senior ranger for the national park and a private guide that I work with when leading eco-adventures. I've known John for about 5 years now and I see him quite regularly on my trips to Sumatra. He's a pretty special guy and a very good guide. He knows the forest, he's been in the forest his whole life and he's spent his entire career in this area looking after what's inside.
A national park, Taman Nasional Gunung Leuser. Why we need, because we need a forest, because we need a water, and maybe like air, So everything like the oxygen, it's coming from the forest. So if people try to destroying the forest, especially in the national park, I think it will be gone,
I've worked with orangutans and worked with primates for most of my life actually. And so when I'm at home at Auckland Zoo, my job is to share my knowledge and my passion, and I guess that kind of makes me be seen as an expert somewhat in orangutan behaviour or primate behaviour. But then when I come to Sumatra, it is quite humbling to be a student and to be learning from the masters, I guess. John could navigate the forest with his eyes closed. He knows exactly which animal has been where and how long ago, and sees things long before I ever could. The other remarkable thing about John is that he knows every individual orangutan in this part of the forest. He worked with some of these animals in the 1990s while they were still being rehabilitated for a life in the wild. We've woken up really early this morning. It's just before sunrise, so it's a perfect opportunity just to sit in the forest and listen to the sounds and look up at the orangutan nest and just see if we're lucky enough to catch a glimpse of one getting out of bed for the morning. What a lot of people don't know is that orangutans make nests to sleep in. They make day nests, which are usually lower to the ground and made for a quick nap, while their night nests are truly amazing feats of engineering. They usually make a new nest each night, and not just because they like clean sheets, but because the materials they use only last for so long. For example, they use branches and leaves woven into elaborate structures, creating mattresses, pillows, and even roofs. They've also been known to use a special vegetation that repels mosquitoes. Orangutans start making their nests just before dark, working really fast to build a nest that will safely support their size and weight throughout the night, ensuring an important deep slumber. There's just something moving in the trees over here, so it's either a troop of Thomas leaf monkeys or macaques, or it could be an orangutan that's just woken up. Still exciting, they're still moving. And you can hear gibbons, La gibbons waking up. So John said, come have a look at something. Hopefully that's what we're looking for.
See the bones?
Yeah, the big,
Yeah.
there it is. It's hanging. We're standing in a spot in the forest and we've got an orangutan who's just woken up in the tree above us on the right. And there's white-handed gibbons way up in the tree on our left, so we're in a pretty amazing spot right now. We're lucky to see the gibbons because they're really elusive and they don't like people, they're really shy. And usually when you see a gibbon, as soon as they see you or hear you, they just take off, and they are so fast and so agile. Bukit Lawang is the site of Sumatra's first orangutan rehabilitation centre, a site where captured and confiscated orangutans were released back into the forest. That's where Mina, who we met earlier, came from, and that's why we know her history. The centre's actually been closed since 2002, but there's still a significant number of orangutans here, which makes it a good place to see them. As ecotourism continues to develop, it's important to keep in mind what's best for the animals, and that isn't always the case. This is a feeding platform over here. So what used to happen is that the park rangers would have kind of feeding times throughout the day for tourists, and they would sit up there with food, and then the visitors, the government built this just to keep a safe distance between the tourists and the orangutans. It's no longer in operation.
There is no more feeding platform, so they will try to find their own food in the forest. So because they have to live in the forest without help anymore from the people. So right now the national park people, after there is no more feeding platform, so we're doing monitoring.
I really wanted to show you this just because it perfectly illustrates how far the thinking has come and just how positive progress has been in this area. As the world changes and we all try to adapt, we need to find out how we humans can live in harmony with wildlife and the environment. One of the many reasons I think John is such an incredible guy is that he's working towards this future through a school that he set up in his own backyard. Here they teach a curriculum focused on conservation and English. Hello! Hello! Apa kabar? Hai! Nama saya Amy. Saya dari Selandia Baru. Yeah. He's got 4 kids of his own, and still he's paid for this out of his own pocket. I'm happy to say that John now receives help from the Sumatran Ranger Project, who fund the teachers' salaries and school trips into the national park. This kind of initiative gives me real hope for the future.
We try to teach them about the conservation, because this is like a generation, you know. Maybe if we try to talk with the old people, maybe they're not like understand, or maybe some of them they not care. But when I try to teach the kid, so they will be explain also their parents.
By teaching English and conservation to these children, many of them can now look at careers as rangers or guides, a great alternative to a low-income livelihood like working in palm oil. And that's not only a great thing for these forest edge communities, but also for the future of the forest and the wildlife that call it home.
And people, what's his name?
Every time you visit Auckland Zoo, you're supporting our wild work in Sumatra. To date, through zoo visits and donations, our Auckland Zoo Conservation Fund has contributed over $4 million to conservation projects in New Zealand and around the world. To find out more, visit aucklandzoo.co.nz.